Today we're going to be talking to my friend and colleague, Bo Helskov-Elven, who's a very famous Swedish psychologist who's worked across a range of human services over the years. Bo was actually one of the first ever Studio 3 trainers in Scandinavia. Bo has written numerous books and articles, including my favourite, No Fighting, No Biting, No Screaming, which was an excellent book about low arousal approaches in human healthcare. So welcome, Bo.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're very welcome. I'd like some of our listeners to understand first, because as we explained to you, this podcast is reaching a much wider audience. It's interesting and ironic that a lot of your books I know reach a much wider audience because you've expanded the construct across many areas. But if I was to say to you start with, can you explain to the listeners a little bit about who you are, where you've come from, that kind of gives them a context to where you are here today? Just in, however long or concise you want to make with it. Who is Bo is really the question. Who is Bo?
Exactly. Yeah. I'm a psychologist. I work in Sweden and Denmark. I live in Sweden, but very close to Denmark. I speak both languages. I've been interested in the field of challenging behavior and the low arousal approaches for many years and for many reasons, I think. My main way in is that I'm interested in human rights and how we can use that in groups where we don't tend to think about human rights. And I think it's actually something my parents taught me. Just a small story. My parents used to have different people living with us, often people with an addiction, either waiting to get into rehab or on the way out from rehab to be reintroduced in society. And they used to live in our basement and they were eating at our table. And we had this guy living with us, and he was like 25 years old, and he was waiting to get into prison. But there was a waiting list for prison at that time at about 1 year. So he needed to stay with us because he did not want to be in his hometown, because there might be bad company there and he might drink too much if he was there. But once a week, he was supposed to go there anyway. It was 90 kilometers away, 60 miles. But he needed to go and present himself at the police station once a week. And then he asked my parents, I'm not really sure I can manage that because my old friends will be there and, so many temptations. Could I borrow one of the kids to bring there? Because then I can manage. And then he borrowed my little brother. He was 4 years old. So once a week, they went 60 miles on the train. Wow. Went to the police station and went 60 miles back on the train, and he didn't drink and he didn't get into bad company. That's the kind of parents I had. Not many parents would do that, but it went okay for this guy. He came into prison, he came out, he went into rehab, and he met a woman, and they got 3 nice kids, and I still know him. So that's the way it works.
So sort of at what age did you know or decide you were going to be a psychologist?
I wasn't thinking I was supposed to be a psychologist. The reason I became a psychologist is that I got a disease in my balance system. So I needed to find a job where I could sit down. So I became a psychologist. It's actually that simple.
I know, but sometimes the simplest explanations are difficult for our listeners to understand, but absolutely. Yeah. We've discussed this before, but, again, you've had that experiences in your background. Yeah. You got into what you were doing. But if you look back now to the past, did you think you'd be doing what you were doing exactly today if you had a crystal ball? Do you think this is where you thought you would be in 30 years, 35 years?
No, absolutely not. I haven't been interested in challenging behavior as when I was studying, or the first years after. I was interested in the ethics of my work. And the reason I work in this field is that's where the ethics are the most important. I actually asked Andy once, Andy, why are you interested in challenging behavior? And you said you're not.
Yes, I remember that actually.
Yeah, it was about ethics. Yeah,
values.
So I think we have the same background there. We saw something and we said this can be done better.
Yeah. We're kind of psychologists who are really human rights campaigners masquerading as psychologists, I think is a lovely phrase.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And that's that is so true though, actually think about it. And I think, this kind of for the audience here, and Ellie's got loads of questions, and I think that's right, is that even that ethical veneer, I've seen that in you from a very early stage in sometimes talking to staff teams. We have, for the audience's benefit, Bo and I have worked together off and on over the years in different ways. And often your approach to my own is to get people to connect with the emotion that surrounds difficult situations. But the ethical veneer is always strong. And I think, I think it's interesting because you're actually, I'm going to say this to the listeners, Bo is quite well known as somebody who has got some very clear lines in the sand about what is ethical and what isn't ethical. And I think that's one of the things that that drew us together in the first place. Pretty strong. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I think it drives what we do. I mean, I think you've already answered the question I was going to ask you about, is there a profound experience or experiences that drifted you into this area? I think you've already described one to me about growing up in a family where you have parents who would do what you described and take someone into their home, take risks. Your parents themselves, though, would you describe them as very laid back like you? Because you are very laid back, or were they just, what were they like?
Very laid back. My father, he had a way of life saying that he never took any initiatives. He waited till things presented themselves. That means that we never bought a car. We always got a car from somebody. We never bought a house, but somebody asked, could we switch houses? That's he believed in that. So it was a very laid back background. I would say that. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. I'm looking at Ellie here in the screen thinking, Ellie, I think we should just jump into some of your curiosities. We'll get round to everything in the end. What he's passionate about, what drives this man, why we all connect. But I think, Ellie, over to you for a little bit with some of the questions that you were curious about, because obviously you don't know Bo as well as I do, and that's fine. And let's fire away.
Fab, thank you. I'm just having a look. Rachel's very kindly shared them for me as a prompt because I wouldn't be able to remember all of these. I'm just thinking about the things. I watched some of your really good videos, Bo, on YouTube. I went onto your channel just to have a look. I have heard of you from Andy, from others in Studio 3. I know you've got a long-standing relationship there. But I'm going to try and come at it from the lay listener's perspective. I'm going to represent them today as somebody who says, why should I listen to this podcast? What's it got to do with me in my life? And I would say, you're a human and we have all got so much to learn about ourselves, our shared space, how we do it well, how we do it better. I always think of the sort of, I'm going to resist trying to use the word spectrum because some people really don't like it. There's like a wedge. And at the far end of the wedge, say, for example, my daughter might sit, she does a non-speaker, she's deafblind, she's a very minority community in many ways. But she has been my teacher for my entire life, the entire time I've had her in my life. She's phenomenal. She's utterly phenomenal. And she has got it nailed in so many ways. And we just don't understand or value the perspective. And when I was watching your videos, it really struck me how simply they came across. I thought they're so relevant, even though I think you recorded some about 7 years ago, but you're asking questions of today. So today being, we've talked with other guests around addiction to fear and anxiety cycles, consuming too much news that is not good for us. One of our other guests talked about mindful consumption. Somebody else talked about the simple human things we do that see and validate and tell somebody we're here in the worst possible scenarios. So really digging into the depths of our humanity. And I love that you've come from a human rights perspective as well. There's lots of reasons for that. The first question was really, you talked about the power of responsibility, which I think is really important nowadays, because I think we are actively encouraged to not take so much responsibility, because then we become very bland, we become compliant, we become accepting of things we shouldn't become accepting of. We sort of dampen down our senses to that's just wrong. And I wonder if the power of responsibility has actively been squashed a bit in place of you don't need to do all of this, you can do whatever. What do you feel about that? Because it's almost like it's what happens when we stop saying I can't do this because of that.
Mhm.
Our excuses and I'd like to start there.
When I think about responsibility, I lean towards some psychologists working in the 50s and in the 80s. But they only said something that somebody said a very long time ago. So it's very old thoughts. And I think it's actually a very human thing. And I think the thing that got me to think about it was when I've been working a long time with about half my time. I sit with staff and I do consultancy.
Yeah.
And I work in schools. I work in a lot of homes for people who have an addiction and a long time of homelessness. I work in, it's very different kind of facilities. But very often I find that staff try to get rid of responsibility. They talk about, one thing is they say, oh, but it's not our work that's not good enough, it's the parents of this child. And I find that very funny because then I can make fun of them. And sometimes I like to make fun of stuff. Mm-hmm. And the way I do it is that I say, okay, but what is it that you can't do here? And they say, what are you saying? We're saying it's the parents who's the problem. Yes, I say, but we only talk about the parents when we are failing. So I'm interested in why are we failing? Why are we talking about mom and dad? And then they say, but they're really crazy. And I say, yeah, most of them are. Very many of the problems I work with, they're actually hereditary problems. So the parents are a bit strange. I mean, I've got kids with special needs. 50% of everybody with my last name has a diagnosis. We have a lot of that in our family. And that unfortunately makes me a little bit different to work with for some people around my kids. That's how it is. But we only talk about that kind of parents when we're failing. So I'm still interested in why are you failing? What are you failing in? And then we start talking. Because when they talk about the parents, they actually put in the responsibility of the child's behavior on the parent, instead of keeping it himself, and that makes them powerless. A powerless staff is, that's really bad. That means nothing is going to happen. That's where it comes from. And then I work with a lot of people who have a long, maybe 25 years of homelessness and addiction. And a lot of them have a tendency to always think that it's somebody else's behavior that caused their problems. Very few have a tendency to say, I caused my problems. And you need to do that in order to get out of that position. When you think about the 12-step program, it's all about taking on a responsibility. So actually, it's the same way of thinking. And it's actually written in the Quran 1,400 years ago, and it's one of Jordan B. Peterson's 12 principles. so I mean, it's really a global thing. If you need to make a difference, you need to figure out what you should do, not what everybody else should do. And I think that's very important to get staff to think about that. I use a metaphor once in a while. It's
once in a while.
I like metaphors.
I'll be quiet.
Yeah, I like metaphors. Yeah. One of my metaphors is the parking attendant. If you get a parking ticket, you can think that I got a parking ticket because I put the car in the wrong place. That was stupid. Or you can think I got a parking ticket because the parking attendant is an idiot. And if you think that it's because of the parking attendant, you'll put your car in the same place tomorrow because it wasn't your fault. And then you'll get a new parking ticket. And then you have two pieces of evidence saying that parking attendants are idiots, but you're not learning anything. So if we need to not get parking tickets, we need to figure out that we put the car in the wrong place. And that's the way I think about responsibility. So it's not about dumping responsibility on people. It's about getting people to understand that I need to take on responsibility in order to actually make a difference, both in my kids' life, in the life of the people that's around me. I need to take on responsibility that my wife is a happy person. I mean, I need to do that all around my life, and I think it's very important to do it.
It's making me, I wrote about something about this. Interestingly, I had a bit of a life quake about 5 years ago, and it made me question everything very closely. And it made me do exactly what you just talked about, which I'd never done before, which was question my role in it. So I took, through 5 years of reflective healing and processing of it, a very close look at what was my responsibility in this. And how was I going to not do that again? A lot of parents wouldn't like me saying this, so I'm putting myself out on the one line a bit here, because the constant inertia we find ourselves within in this system is that the system is really happy with the conflict. It's very happy with the inertia. It's very happy with us blaming each other and just passing the ball back and forth, because it literally doesn't have to do anything different. Because we're busy being conflict driven. And when you sort of helicopter out of that, as I did, I thought, I'm not going to play this game anymore. I will not. That's not saying you don't fight for people's rights or any of the above, but I will not engage in nastiness, bitterness, and backbiting and rudeness anymore. I'm not going to do it. And I haven't. And it's caused more confrontation in terms of people not knowing what to do with me. Then it's such a powerful shift, because when you meet unkindness with kindness, and consistently so, there's only one way it can go. Everybody has to meet you where you are.
Exactly.
It works, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. I know a lot of parents come to me and say, well, how can we get the school to understand that they need to do something more? And I always say to them, don't say what you want the school to do. Ask them how they will solve this problem. But you need to ask it in a way that you actually expect them to be competent. So you say, oh, we have this problem. I know you are very good at this school, and I know you know what you're doing. So what's your plan to fix this problem? I mean, if you talk that way, people will actually often step up to your expectations. But if you say, I have demands, I want this and this, they say that's not you're not the one to make these demands. We decide what happens in school.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting the way you talk about this power of responsibility. And I think it stops us doing this, but I can't because. And I'm like, because the budgie, the dog, the cat, whatever you're about to say next and blame, can we just stop and talk about what we can do in the middle? And it's this ownership of responsibility on wherever you stand in the conversation, isn't it? And it's such a powerful modeling to our kids. Because it's saying we can make room for disagreements here. We don't have to completely align.
Exactly. Yeah, I also have a principle I use sometimes, and it's if I get a question I can't answer, it's probably the wrong question. It sounds a little arrogant, I know, but that means we need to find a question we can answer, because then we can take responsibility. Yeah. So we need to formulate a question we can actually answer that solves this problem, instead of saying, I don't know, or instead of saying it's not my responsibility.
Yes. Yeah. You did that in another video. You flipped that there. I like the way you just flipped that. So it sounds like you're saying something that I'm going to say what? And then you explain what you did by changing the language, which is really powerful. And I heard it in another one of your videos. I think it was the no learning from failure. We learn from success. Now, I had to listen to this a few times before I got what you were saying. And I think I totally got it eventually. But I was like, that's not how we hear it. We hear it the other way around, don't we? Which is, I've said it myself. We learn from failure. And you're saying we don't learn from failure. We actually learn from success.
Yeah.
Which you're right.
The only thing we learn from failure is to step away and never do it again. And that means we stop doing things. If you get I'm a neuropsychologist actually, so I was taught how to train people how to walk when they had a stroke or something like that. And you never just say to them, oh, you need to fall over a lot of times and then you learn to walk because you learn from failure. No, you say we need to make sure you're not falling over, because one fall and you're never walking again. Because what you learn from failure is to not try. So
expand on that for our viewers, because they're going to be where I was last night.
Yeah, but you will learn from every step that you succeed. You will learn from that. But if you fall, you just learn that it's nothing for you. So in order to develop, we need to make sure that people are succeeding. It's like if you have a kid in a school and there's the recess time is not working properly, and then we say, but he needs to be in recess and he'll learn. No, if it's not working, if it's a lot of conflict, it'll just take away all of his surplus. He'll be stressed. He'll not learn anything. But if you structure his recess time, make sure he has good recess time, you have situations where he can train social skills in succeeding in doing things, then it'll be full of energy and it'll actually give him energy for the learning as well. So I think it's very important to say that we need to make sure that people are succeeding in order to learn.
I want this to be less about, as you said, Ellie, psychology. But the other point about this principle is that trauma is not a good learning tool. Bo and I used to debate a lot about, Nietzsche said, what challenges us made us stronger? Actually, no, it makes you fall apart even more. And I think positive psychological principles, Bo, haven't they? They're catching up with this idea that actually it isn't just, this North American say high five, but it is about the fact that if you keep analyzing failure, you don't necessarily always get to success. And I was debating someone regionally, Bo, and if you was in this bit, they were talking about air traffic control, the usual thought. We learn to prevent disasters by analysing them. Or you train better pilots, you make sure the machinery works. That's actually what's going to keep people safer, not analysing the next disaster. And we do this in our work all the time, Ellie, when, Bo in Sweden, I know, Bo, you've been involved in very high profile things. So have I over here. And, care and abuse in care, you'll suddenly get people saying, oh my God, that's terrible. It gets into their consciousness. But then we're going to analyse failure.
Yeah.
And then, as I said to somebody once, I work with an organisation which I can't name because I would get sued, Bo. Very good organisation that got a bit large. And they had some amazingly successful parts of the country where they worked. And then there are a few that weren't so successful. They had schools as well. And we were constantly writing reports about the schools that were failing, all the resources going into it, rather than saying, do you know, if you go 100 miles up the road, you can see the same staff, same staffing level, same ratios, different culture, same organisation. And for me, that the psychology of success is the idea that you build success with more success.
Yeah.
And this idea, Ellie, that there's, and both you and I have discussed this a lot about, we need to learn through tough love, or that's not what Bo was definitely saying. What we're saying,
no, exactly.
We don't learn that way.
Actually, we have a. I don't know if you heard about the concept of curling parenting. It's a Danish concept developed by a psychologist called.
I can be smart. I actually do, but that's just to be smart. I probably heard it from you in the first place. Yeah. So go on, tell our audience.
Yeah, he wrote a book 2000 where he said that if when you foster kids, if you're always sweeping in front of them, they will become weak. They will, they will not succeed in school. They'll, fall out and then we had a big Danish study. They looked at 6,000 kids born 95.
Yeah.
And then they looked at how is it going according to this principle. And they said like this, that there are different groups of parents. Some parents help their children more than they need, and the children don't need to help at home. Then they have some parents who help the children more than they need, but the children also help out at home. And then we have the parents that only help the children as much as they need, and the children have to do home, chores at home. And then there's the group that doesn't help more than they need, and the kids don't do anything. And the group that absolutely had the best results was the one where the parents did more than the kids need, helped them more than they needed, and they had chores at home. The next best was the ones where they didn't have chores at home, but the parents still helped them more than they needed. And the worst group was, of course, the one that didn't help at home and didn't get any more help than they needed. The thing here is that it was a big study, 6,000 kids followed in 25 years. The thing here is they say that the concept of you need to be, grit comes from being, having hard times. That's what we call the American story. But the American story is a very individual story, and we are not individuals. We are flock people. We are flock animals. And what we teach the kids by helping them more than they need, driving them to football training, even when they could go on a bicycle, but also making them cook the food on Fridays, actually tells the kids that we help each other. And by doing that, we're a group, we're a flock. And flock is helping the ones who need and, get everything to be as fun as possible together.
Yeah. And of course, the community does that as well for our listeners. It's not just parents, it's the whole community. Your community's helping people. You experience that in a sense as a young person. Of community.
As it's actually a very old discussion because Socrates was talking about it in Plato's The State. And what he says, if we translate it, is he says that if we didn't work like that, helping each other and believing that everybody wants to help us, we would never get into a car and drive out on the motorway.
Yeah.
If you thought that everybody just wanted to crash into you, you wouldn't dare. But you actually expect people to help each other out. And that's why you dare being on the M4.
No one dares being on the M4 for our overseas listeners. It's a big motorway, autobahn with potholes in the UK. But anyway, Ellie, how does that reflect back with you in terms of both style is, and I do know it really well, is to say something that's kind of creates a dissonance, a shock in people until they process what they're saying. I think it's something he's acceptable. And I'm going to say this now as a friend, but you know exactly what you're saying most of the time. It's not, you're quite calculating, and I mean that in a nice way. But this idea of applying this to staff in care homes, these principles, this North American thing that you've touched on, of almost, it's a stereotype, it's a tougher kind of love. You're talking about cooperation and collaboration. Yeah. Not what we would call tough love as such.
I even think that what you do in a care home is that you're not supposed to tell people what they're supposed to do. Yeah. They're not supposed to be obedient. We are supposed to cooperate. And the problem here is that the person might not be very good at cooperating, and we may not be very good at cooperating with the person who has another level of functioning than we have, whether it's up or down. So that means that it's our responsibility to get this cooperation going. The best way to get Mrs. Anderson in the care of the elderly home into the shower is actually by her saying yes to it. It's not by putting her in there. So we need to figure out a way, how can we get her to say yes to going to the shower? Because she doesn't know that she needs it, because she forgot how long time it was that she did it last time. But we need to make her say yes by being people she wants to say yes to.
That's a nice analogy.
Yeah, it's actually that simple.
Ellie?
Yeah, I just was thinking there was a couple of other things, so this all leads into it really nicely. One of them was when you talked about becoming a leader, but the bit that I was really interested in, I think you've just talked about there, is how we language our frame of support. with regards to if you need to get this lady to have a bath, or how are you leading with that in terms of what comes forward when you are talking or engaging or communicating something with this person? And I think you powerfully talked about people will follow if you, and like affects like, again, coming back to affect, which is something I wanted you to really explain to people. And then that linking to self-control, we all strive to maintain self-control. So these things for me were like links in a chain when you're explaining them. So the self-control leads on from language, and I suppose both directly affect one another as well, because how we're holding or maintaining our self-control affects how we language. So if we're in good shape and we're maintaining it well and we are feeling relaxed, then our language is likely to reflect that, because it will reflect the internal state that we're in. And then, so like begets like again. And then as we move along the chain, it was the last bit that you talked about that I looked at. There are lots more videos. Was all conflicts are solutions.
Yeah.
So those sort of things in the chain, but the effect being the thing that wraps around it all. Because I love what you talked about effect, because I think people really underestimate the power of effect, and it's very human, because we are all subject to it and subject each other to it, and then call it things. And I'm like, do you understand what effect is? Do you understand emotional transaction and contagion? And I don't think people do. And I think if they did, we'd sort some of these things out a bit more, because it's a physiological, biological, hardwired thing, isn't it?
And it's a shared experience.
Absolutely.
Yeah, massively.
It's a shared experience.
Yeah.
You know,
exactly. I think the best way to explain it is that if you're in a bus and there's somebody smiling at you, you never saw them before, but you actually smile back because it's contagious. But you also get the effect of joy when that person is smiling at you, and you might get it because the person is smiling. You might get it because you're smiling. We don't really know, because of course it goes both ways. But that affect we like. We like a little bit of affect, especially the positive affects. We like to be interested in things. If you want to slip into flow, you need a lot of interest. And we like the joy. What we don't like is anger. We don't like shame, those kind of affects. But sometimes we get into anxiety. We get a lot of anxiety, of course. And if we become distressed, we try to get back to being calm again as fast as possible. And a lot of what we call challenging behavior is, attempts to maintain equilibrium in the affective level. You just try to get rid of this dissonance and this distress that you're in. And one way to do it is to make sure that people not come close to you, because close people are stressful. So you try to, you might spit at people because then they stay away. It's a solution. It's not a good solution in the long run, but in the short run, it's really, really effective. So you will do that in order to become calm, because when people are a little bit, farther away from you, it's easier to be calm. But we have a lot of that kind of behaviors. You refuse to do what people ask you to. You lie to get out of difficult situations. You hit people sometimes. Sometimes you hurt yourself. Sometimes you drink or do something else involving drugs or something like that. And sometimes you just call people bad names. But you do it all in order to try to control the situation, in order to control your own affect, in order to make people leave you alone so you can calm down, because we do not like distress. So that's why I say it's a solution. The problem is when the other person in the other end of this equation is doing the same thing in order to get his or her distress down, then we have a conflict. And a conflict is two people trying to solve a problem on two different ways, but every time they have a solution, they create problems for the other one.
Yeah.
And the only way to get out of that kind of situation is to try to figure out a solution that doesn't become a problem for the other person. And that's some people are very good at that. I mean, people you meet in who have a lot of friends. I talked to a politician, a Swedish politician. He's in the EU Parliament, and he's on the very left of the political spectrum, but he's very well liked. Even of the politicians on the right, they say he's such a nice person, and it's always good to have a discussion with him. And I actually met him because I was riding the night train. Sweden is a big country. You ride the night train, you sleep on the train, and there's breakfast in the breakfast car.
These are very nice trains for our audience listening, okay?
Yeah.
Got to say that.
It's a big country. We need them. Yeah. And me and my colleague was riding this train, and then we went into the breakfast car, and the politician was sitting there. And my friend grew up with him. So they started talking, and I started talking too. And he realized, oh, but you're Bose, he said, this politician. You're the one talking about low arousal. And I said, yeah. And he said, yeah, it inspired me a lot. He said, I mean, I'm a politician. He says, conflict is what we do. But it's important to only be conflictive about the conflicts we need to have. So he said, I trained really hard to back off in situations that are not important in order to make people listen. When I do have a conflict, I want people to look at. And I think it was so wise and such a good strategy. And that made him, his friend with people on the very right as well. I mean, and when he went to the EU Parliament, he stopped in the Swedish Parliament and they threw a party for him across all parties. I think it's wonderful. But he says, it's about, I never make problems for other people. And when I get into a conflict, a political conflict, I say what I think. I do not put it in people's knee. They need to take it into there and say what they think. And by that, we can actually talk about things without it becoming personal. And that means we can go out and take a beer afterwards.
We could do with thousands and thousands of politicians like that. Maybe.
Yeah.
Think about it seriously, because in the moment, there's a lot of shouting around the world. We're not going to get too political. Yeah. A lot of, I'm in this camp, you're in that camp. And I think it's so relevant, that example, to where we are today.
And actually a way how you could use low arousal in making the world a better place at a very grand level.
Absolutely agree. But everywhere I go, I say this approach is not just for somebody with a learning disability, for autistic people, whatever. It's for every human in every role, because regardless of labels, regardless of diagnoses, regardless of every single difference, we are all first and foremost humans. Yeah, and we have the same needs, whatever level of need. We have the same, and we have this commonality that we try and ignore. But it's the more we understand it, I think we get into a much better place to do something different. And that's what I think Andy and I were looking at with the podcast, was really to open up this small tiny space and like pull apart the cavern and say, we're jumping right in the middle here, because we actually need to get down into the depths of the stuff we keep avoiding. It's really easy to go yes or no. I don't like you, I like you. I want to go back to debate and talking about tough stuff and getting it wrong when we do it, on the way to getting it right. I'll just caveat that, because we believe we will fall over. We're going to. We're going to get it clumsily wrong. We'll say sorry if we do, but we can't talk about these things if we don't make space to talk about these things. And if we don't talk about them, we will just keep this state of inertia nicely in place, and we'll never get anything changed. So we thought, could we make a difference by just talking about some of this and making it very relatable, because it's human stuff. And whether you're a boardroom CEO trying to manage a team, the head of the family, wherever you sit or whoever you are, we all have these situations, don't we? We really
do. I think I like key situations where most of us fall over. I like to talk about those. And one of them is when you're driving on the motorway and you're, somebody you're trying to overtake a lorry maybe, but somebody behind you think you're a little bit slow, so they overtake you on the inside before you're by the lorry. That's a perfect situation.
Hang on, I don't do that anymore, Bo. That's unfair.
Are you that person, Andy? 'Cause
Possibly.
honestly,
But anyway,
he might have used to, yeah, but
not anymore.
If that happens, some of us will just press the accelerator and lock you in behind the lorry, and then we think you'll learn. And this would be a very.
My husband does this. I'm just gonna say he will lock you in, and I'm sitting in the seat going, "What do you think you're doing?"
Yeah, because what happens
Take
is
your foot off. Yes.
what happens is that the person will be very. The person will be very effective. They will start giving you the finger. They'll start driving closer to your car. And when they eventually drive past you, they will make sure that you're an idiot.
Yeah.
But actually, you thought that they would learn. But nobody learns in that situation. So instead of making this it's dangerous to overtake on the inside, but locking somebody in is a lot more dangerous. So we'll actually you boost the situation becoming a very dangerous situation. So we need to figure out, how can I in that situation just back off and let the idiot go on, because that's safe for everybody.
And also, you said this before, Bo, it's something we share, which is that a lot of it is about our perceptions. We discussed this quite a lot. You see something, your brain interprets it one way and said, that's a threat.
Yeah.
I know I'm going to respond to that threat with conflict. And I think one of the areas I'm desperate to get you onto is a bit more about, I think, again, and a lot of our other colleagues on this, Ellie, too, share a similar view to what we might call approaches where we use punishment with people and sanctions. And you're very strong on that. And I think sometimes people think we're hippies when we talk about not being fans of punishment and sanctions. But yours is, to me, a very simple view that we don't learn very well by punishment anyway, regardless of the morality and the issues.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't help us anyway. In a situation on the motorway, it will be punishment to lock people in. And they will not learn in that situation. No. It's actually that simple. So we, of course, need to find another way. Then people will say, but then we should reward the good stuff instead. No, why should we? I mean, I have a wife. She's called Susan. We've been married for many years. And
she's very tolerant and lovely, by the way, to our listeners, but carry on.
Yes, absolutely. And she's a midwife. And sometimes she does things that I may not think that I would have done it that way. But I don't have to have her doing it my way. It's okay. But the thing is, I would never try to punish her into doing it my way, and I would never try to reward her into doing it my way. I would try to figure out maybe her way is actually smarter.
Yeah, I wanted to say this for Ellie as well on this, which is I just want to draw it out of you. And I know I've known you too well and too long, really, but I remember once we were having a conversation about why you're not a behaviorist. Yeah. And Bo got quite itchy with me at the time. We were sitting in an airport. I think it might be in Canada, actually. And we had this very lengthy discussion. And it's a very beautiful discussion about saying, well, why do you not consider yourself to be a behaviorist? So I'm going to ask it. Why do you not consider yourself to be a behaviorist, Bo? And let's clear up the mystery to other people, because I don't think I'm one either. But why do you think you're not a behaviorist? What are you?
Because when I studied, we were supposed to either be behaviorists or psychoanalysts.
Absolutely.
And that's why I became a neuropsychologist, because then I didn't have to choose between two silly ways of looking at the world. No, I don't believe that psychology is here to manipulate people. I believe that we're supposed to find a way to get people to decide for themselves. Self-determination is what we're going for. And when we look at all the research we have, what helps people actually do the best thing is to give them good options and good choices, and then get them to be better and better at making their own choices, not by doing what we want them to. but figure out how can you do what's best for you? How can you figure that out? So in terms of the big theories, I would say I'm a self-determinist. And I think self-determination theory is the third big theory, and it's got a lot more empiric data behind it than either behaviorism or the psychoanalysis. So it's those two are just dead for me. I don't use them. They don't make any difference for me, but I can really use this new modern psychology. One of the things I use a lot in that, in my everyday life also, is that in self-determination theory, there's something called the theory of needs, or the mini theory of needs. And in that we say that what everybody needs in order to thrive is to, one, have a feeling of deciding in your life, a feeling of autonomy. It doesn't mean that you have to actually be autonomous, because most of us aren't. When I sit in my car, I have very little autonomy. I'm not allowed to drive in the side of the road I want to. I'm only allowed to turn right in certain different ways. And sometimes I don't even decide where I'm going because somebody hired me or my boss told me to. And then I even put on my navigator in order to see if there's an accident. So I also take away the autonomy of deciding which way to go. But I feel like I'm a king of the road. And that feeling, I want to, if I can create that in every person, I am the king of my life. I think that's one thing that's very important for us. The second is feeling competent. The need of feeling competent. Can we find a way of getting this person to feel competent? Maybe not in getting straight A's, because I do work with people who are not very good at straight A's. I mainly work with people who are very far from straight A's. But some of them can be good at something else. I have a son. He's called Matthias. Matthias, his absolutely best skill as a kid was climbing trees. And I did not think that a life skill worth praising. And that was really, really stupid, because now he's 35 years old and he's actually still climbing trees. He makes a living from climbing trees with a motor saw, and he competes. He competed twice in the European Championships and had good, he's around number 10 in the world. In the ability to climb trees. He goes to America and he climbs redwood trees 100 meters high to take samples down for the researchers. So what I did not find a skill worth praising is actually what made his life. And I think a lot of the skills we see in the people around us, it's not important if it's a high status skill, but if it can create a feeling of competence in the person, then we can actually do some difference in the person's life. And the last one is the feeling of belonging. And so, I mean, the feeling of autonomy, the feeling of competence, and the feeling of belonging is if those three are in your life, then you're thriving and you don't get depressed. It's like a positive psychology with a lot more empiric data behind it. But those three needs, I think, is very important.
Well,
and I think one of the belonging, I say always do the small holidays. I live in Sweden, and in Sweden we have on the 25th of June. That's
you have lots of holidays.
Yeah, and the 25th of June is 25th of March. Sorry, that's also a holiday. It's a very small holiday. The 25th of June is midsummer. It's a big holiday, but the smallest one is actually the 25th of March. If you count, it's 9 months before Christmas. So what we're celebrating is what did not happen. If you understand what I mean.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, but that's why we call it we call it Vårfrydagen. That means Our Lady's Day.
Yeah.
But if you say that very fast, it's Vårfrydagen, and that means waffle day.
Yeah.
So we eat waffles on the 25th of March, of course.
Waffeldagen.
Yeah.
Got it.
And that's a perfect holiday, because you don't need to look forward to it. And if you miss it, you can just take it the day after. But it's still a situation where we sit down and we eat waffles and it's nice.
Yeah.
And for a lot of kids with special needs, that's just the right holiday size. Christmas is too much. Normally we have a 2-day Christmas in residential homes because this all December Christmas, that's awful. It's too much. But the waffle day is perfect, and that creates belonging. We do like the Friday. I don't know what you do in England, but in Sweden we have, of course, the very Swedish food of tacos. We have the Friday tacos. That's a tradition in a lot of families. And that's something that ties us together and say, I belong in this group. So when we work with people with special needs, we need to create these small traditions, as many as possible, so we get this feeling of belonging. So we can always fill those 3 needs in any position, in a family, in a care home, in a classroom, in a school. Always try to get these 3, the feeling of I decide in my life, the feeling of competence, and the feeling of belonging. And it's very simple psychology. It's a lot far from rewarding people. And it's a lot far from trying to figure out the conflicts of your sex life like Freud would do. But it's very good work in the everyday world.
So why, because and this will segue probably into a discussion between you and Andy, but just as a layperson asking, because I've heard the self-determination theory, my daughter's ed psych is passionate about this.
Yeah.
Passionate. And it's lovely to hear you talk about it as well, because I love this and it doesn't get enough airtime. So why do we not have self-determination support? And why do we have positive behavior support? So why don't we call it self-determination support and work on the principle of self-determination being the most important thing for people, because that's what you've just talked about.
Yeah, we will. The thing is,
we're going to change it.
Yeah, and
evolution.
And I think about it like this. Freud lived in the 1800s. He died in 1939, but his main things was written around 1900. Behaviorism was developed in the 40s and 50s into what it is today. Self-determination theory, it was mainly work done in the 80s, 90s, and the zeros. The first full book on it came in 2017, so it's quite new, and it takes time for things to trickle into society.
Yeah.
But because of the sheer size of the scientific background, I believe that in 20 years' time, we'll not talk about positive behavior support. We'll, of course, talk about self-determination support.
Well, I'm on the record about, I think that's right. And Ellie, I'd agree with that. It's evolution. And also what people do is they look backwards. They get stuck with ideas and always reinvent the same ideas until it runs out of steam. We had the same with cognitive behavior therapy. We haven't mentioned that whole thing where there was a period in the 80s and 90s where you could fix everything with cognitive behavior therapy. And I said to somebody once, I have somebody in a wheelchair. I was being flippant. Can I use CBT to make them walk? And this very eminent CBT therapist, who I can't name, he went crazy. I was trying to provoke him to say, look, you need to know the limits and where we're going. And this idea of even within self-determination, the reason why I wanted you to answer that question that way, Bo, which is done beautifully, is to get people to understand that there is a philosophical difference here as well. I started out as a mad behaviorist for at least 2 years before I qualified in the 80s. I now tell people I was unwell. I thought I could fix everything with M&Ms and reinforcement theory. But what happens is we understand that even, Bo, you comment about positive psychology, which is that's emerging not as a discipline. I think there's a debate about it, but it's also around the same time saying we need to focus on strengths. We need to focus on what we can do. I am with you. I'll probably say something a bit controversial, Ellie, and you'll understand I'm going to say this is my general rule about anything with the word positive in front of it is if we're using the word positive, we're putting a brand on it. Because if there's positive behavior support, and I'll get into trouble for saying this, there must be negative behavior support and so-so behavior support. And what about in between fluffy mixed behavior support? We don't have, and I think, Ellie, you made this point beautifully before, we're evolving the right language to say, well, how do we get out of these camps and move to the next thing? Freud did amazing things in psychology, but he's been dead since 1939.
Yeah.
We have to accept that change is difficult. And I think we are. I'm with you, Bo. I think we're in quite an exciting next 20 years around how fast things are moving now towards that. We were talking to a psychologist, an eminent psychologist called Ryan Nemec, the other day. Nemec, got to get his name right, Nemec. And just the values comes from a slightly different methodology. You couldn't put a hair, microscopic hair between us, and it would be, and I'd be confident with you and others as well in what our shared values are. And I think within self-determination, there's a thing about freedom.
Yeah.
So in your argument against just focusing on behavior, I think the listeners are very clear that also freedom is part of self-determination. It's the ability to make mistakes, it's the ability to learn, but it is that bit you've given us about, choice. And I think neatly or not neatly, we're both known around in different ways around the construct of low arousal. I often tell people low arousal is inherently steeped in very old ideas and ancient ideas of values and how we treat people. I didn't invent Buddhism. I'd love to claim that, Bo. I'm sure you can't on this podcast. So
I normally say we didn't come up with anything new.
No, we didn't.
It's 2,500 years people wrote this down the first time. Yeah,
it's just a fancy label. But what's interesting is how people polarize things. I was asked recently about what's Bo's view of low arousal. I said, well, he'll have a view and we'll agree on probably most of it. But this construct is evolving. It's not the same construct that was when I started out. Low arousal for me was about, can I stop people jumping all over people and can I reduce crises? And around the time I met you, it was changing to, anyway, this is a bit more than just, as Ellie's saying, a thing we do, like a set of techniques. This fits into humanist philosophy. And I kind of like you to, for the audience, there's no right or wrong to give what you would say is the essence of low arousal to our audience, the Bo view, because I think I'd actually like to hear that as well, to be honest.
I've spent a lot of time thinking about how we think, and I've even done a bit of research on that, and
I know.
Yeah, you were my supervisor. Yeah, but for me, I think it's not so much what we do, because that's methods, and methods we do to reach an aim in the real world. But for me, the very core is actually why we are doing it. What we're doing because we think it'll help. And you can be a positive behaviorist and use positive behavior support. You can also use like motivational, what do you call interviewing? That's very modern. You can motivational interview people into doing bank robberies if you want to. I mean, it's that the outcome is not that there's no ethics around what you want to educate people into doing. I mean, if you call it positive to rob banks, you can do positive behavior support into getting people to rob banks by doing rewards and everything. Of course you can. And from my point of view, low arousal comes from a tradition where we say, no, that's not what we're doing. The first thing we're doing is figuring out what is the right way to go here for this person. So anything that supports the person's autonomy, supports the person's self-control, that's a good method. Anything that supports the person's trust in me is a good method if I'm staff. But anything that destroys the trust, that destroys the person's self-control or destroys the person's autonomy, that's a bad method. And that means my method bag is very large. You can put a lot of stuff into it, and some things you can't put into it. And for me, that's how I choose methods. It's are they autonomy supportive or are they not autonomy supportive? That's the main thing.
That's to me, that's a lovely definition, and I'll pull Ellie in on this as well. But one of the things that's to me very clear is that even in, as I would call it, in the trenches and stopping sort of bad practices, even in when people are melting down and dysregulated, the fundamental principles are humanist. What we're trying to do, as you said, is to find and help people to find a better way. And I think I kind of balk a little bit when people say, "Is it a philosophy?" I'm not sure it is, but I think it is. I'm much more. You've helped me with this, Bo. I'm much more comfortable with using the words kind of philosophy around low arousal than I used to be, and that's a lot of it's down to you and the debates we would have over here in Birmingham.
Yeah.
Usually, one of the issues with Bo that's a problem is he doesn't drink that much, Ellie. So it's very hard to just get to that state in a debate where you're totally disinhibited. But I think you're right. And I think, what we need to do now is not say what was low arousal in 2002, what was low arousal or different interpretations in 2010. In some ways, it's not relevant anymore. It really is. What does low arousal mean now and moving forward? And
exactly. Yeah. Where are we going?
Where are we going? And how do we get people to understand? What's soul destroying for me occasionally, Bowen? I know we've had this conversation before. So I remember going into a service. They didn't know what I did. They thought I was a psychologist and nothing else. They were trained in the approaches of Studio 3, right? So, and I had to sit into a lecture from a manager who said, it's all rubbish, this low arousal. I said, is it? He said, yeah, it's all rubbish. Yeah, it's too softly. It just means leaving people to their own devices. Says I, very interesting. And then their senior manager arrived about an hour later, looking horrified because he was the leader who's a non-leader. And I said, maybe I should introduce myself again. My name's Andy McDonald. I'm the director of Studio 3 Training Systems, and I don't recognize anything you've said for the last hour. And said, this is not about just leaving people to their own devices. And I think I'll say recently in Ireland, Ellie, somebody said to me, that's just speaking quietly to people. That's low arousal, isn't it? And when I hear that, it kind of breaks my heart, thinking, yeah, it's a bit more than that. Just a bit more.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's that way of thinking is looking at the world as a dichotomy.
Yeah.
You're either hard or you're soft.
Yeah.
I don't believe in that. I don't even I don't even believe in being in the middle, because I think the scale is wrong. That's why I say this is a wrong question. We need another question in order to answer this. And actually, somebody provided it for us. She's called Wendy Grolnick. She's a self-determination psychologist. And what she says is like she's talking about fostering normal kids. And she says, you have a position. Is your position, I want to train this child in autonomy, or I want to control this child? There's no middle in between those. And she says it's a core belief. And then some other people who looked at it says, no, it's more situational, because of course you want them to obey when they're supposed to brush their teeth. You just want them to choose it in the long run, right? So we try to find out, but there's something underneath that, and that's the scale of structure. Low structure is chaos, and high structure, if it's controlling, is harsh. It's tough. But if it's high structure, autonomy supportive high structure, then it means that we provide the ground service to make you do the choices. So that means if we have a person and we knock on his door in a care home and he says, go away, some people would be very active and they would go in against his will. Some people would be very passive and say, oh, he said go away. And of course, that's failing him. So what we need to figure out, okay, he said go away. We actually want a yes here. We want him to say, come in and help me. So we need to find a way that we can get him to say, come in and help it. Because we want his choice to be to get help. But we need to make ourselves worthy of being invited. And I think that's maybe the core of low arousal. How can you make yourself worthy of being invited into this person's life so you can actually help? I have a fantastic example. I work in it's called an acute residential place. That means people move in there when they've been on the street. And a lot of people stay there as the first way of living indoors for years. And they had this guy, and he was quite anxious. And there was a little bit of noise, and he went out in the hallway, and there was some staff having a good time making fun, and he threw an axe after them, and he didn't hit them. Of course, he didn't want to hit them, but then the boss of this place, the leader, he went and gave him a hug, and then some other asked him afterwards, "How did you dare give them a hug? He threw the axe at us," and he said, "Yeah, but he didn't have the axe anymore." It's not dangerous. And then giving him a hop, he asked him, do you have more X's? And he says, yes. And I say, can we go into your room and look? And I said, yes. And they hit 27 more X's. This was a guy with a high level of anxiety. He was afraid. And he had 28 X's. I mean, and then we asked him, can we take care of these X's for you? And he said, yeah, okay, but then you need to make sure that I'm safe. And we said, we will make sure you're safe. And we could take away, we just left him one little X he could have in his bed because he thinks he needed that. And it was no problem. But we need to figure out, this is a guy who's been living on the street.
Yeah.
And then he moves into this place and there's a lot of other people there in the same situation as him. Of course he's afraid. They steal from each other and, it's just how it is in that culture. So, of course, he acted on his anxiety and we needed to make him trust us. So it's not him not doing anything. It's us getting the X's. And that's what we're supposed to do.
I think that's really powerful. I'm thinking of so many stories. I don't know where Andy's brain's gone. Mine's gone straight to education and lots of stories of why we shouldn't. And I'm sure people have lots to say. But I think what you've powerfully said there is exactly this middle bit. If we don't lean into our humanity and really give one another a chance and really try and do something that nobody else dares in a way to do, we will not break these cycles of doing it this way that's not working.
Exactly.
And having a kind of an excuse for it. It's because this person does, and here we go again, pinging off into the ether. And I'm like, there's no power of responsibility as you talk about in that, is there, Bo? So what you're saying is we have to bring this powerfully into our responsibility zone, as scary as it is, but the other way is just as scary, if not more, with more long-lasting consequences. Like, I know people go, yes, but the risk is he could have, and you're going to get that. And I'm like, but I work in the way you do, not with access, clearly, but my daughter's, she's live, moving person who has a significant trauma baggage. I have no idea still at 18 years in how she feels about a lot of the stuff she went through when she lost her vision, when she was restrained, when she was treated appallingly and we had to bring a human rights case and all this stuff this kid carries around. She doesn't use words like we do. I know when she's upset, it could go 3001 different ways. And I still don't know which way it's going to go. And that's not because I don't know her well. It's because it's trauma and how it spills out and how we are in any given moment of any given day is completely unpredictable at times because we're humans and we're messy. And three things might have triggered us at once. And we've never actually experienced how it's going to pull together as a presentation of distress. It just might happen. She does this. She does predictable things and then she does less predictable things. And I always say it's a bit like, I don't know which way. So we just have to be able to hold this space really well. And we lean into, you can trust me. I'm not going anywhere. I'm not afraid. I will help you. You're safe. All this human stuff. I will walk with you in this dark, horrific moment where I know you're really going to struggle. I'm not leaving. And this stuff has shortened the time that any of this stuff, if she's upset, lasts for.
Exactly. Yeah.
But we have to take positive risks in those moments as a team, live, as it's happening. And we're looking at each other like, have you got my back? Because I've got yours. Are we ready? Are we going to do this? Because if we just shut it down to, we can't because this is too blah, blah, blah. We've affected the emotional temperature of the room. She's already got the message. She knows we shifted and she's planning a different route because this one is no longer available. And I don't think we understand how fast somebody who's hypervigilant in the moment of utter distress and fear is making decisions. And our decisions are massively affecting I'm not sure. Do you think we should? And it's all this if we were where you were saying, which is I'm going to do the human thing and walk in there. I'm going to trust myself and take the responsibility in this moment. I know we might not always get it right, but I think we would definitely not get it as wrong as we can as well.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Is it a balance? Is it a like it'll go one way or the? I'm saying this because this is the kind of conversation Andy and I are trying to have, which is there might not be a whole answer to this, but we've got to talk through some of the.
Yeah, and I try not to say that this is a scale where we are in the middle. I try to say we are somewhere else. It's another scale.
Yeah.
There's a lot of methods that fits perfectly with Low Arousal's approach, and one of them is trauma-informed care. It fits right in. It's another theoretical background, but it fits right in, and they do the same things we do. And I read up on that, and I have this wonderful example. I started a psychologist company 25 years ago. I'm not part of it anymore, but our oldest son is working there. He's a psychologist. And they do a lot of parent competence evaluations for people with special needs who get kids. That's really out there on the on the frontier of what we can use psychology for, and it's a lot of ethics in it. But we always said when we started the company, we want the clients to love us, even though sometimes it's something that's bad for them that we decide. So we did not want to have secret addresses and telephone numbers because, I mean, I did an assessment of a member of the Bandidos, and they took his children away after it. And he called 3 weeks later and say, I'm having this first meeting with the kids. Do you have any tips for me? I mean, then we succeeded in making this alliance and making him understand what was best for his kids. And that's the way we work. But Daniel, our son, he was doing this assessment, and this guy was coming in. He was a man of 35, a lot of years in prison. And he came in and he said, you're going to figure out if I'm a good dad. And Daniel said, yeah, that's my job here. And he says, so you might take my kids away. And Daniel said, no, not really me, but some people might read this and take your kids away. But I mean, we'll figure that out. You can trust me. I'll make sure that I'm not writing anything you do not agree in, because we're writing about competences, and we want you to understand what's good for you. And so you can trust me. And then the guy said, I could have brought a knife. And Daniel said, yeah, you could. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Then he said, then I could get you to write what I wanted. And Daniel said, I don't know about that, but you could have brought a knife. Yeah, absolutely. And then the guy said, but I didn't. And Daniel said, no, I'm grateful. Thank you. We'll make this work. And then the secretary asked him afterwards, shouldn't we call the police? And Daniel said, no, why? And she said, but he was threatening you. And Daniel said, no, he told me he didn't bring a knife.
Yeah.
That's what he was telling. I mean, so this is not being in the middle. This is about taking people somewhere else.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're not in the middle. We're not soft. We're not hard. We're somewhere else. And we're doing it together with that person and finding that ground where we can actually meet that person and make it better for that person. And
Daniel, the audience won't know Daniel. Daniel is an exceptional laid-back practitioner of the low arousal approach, and had somebody else been in that room and sought confrontation, I'm sure they could have created it.
Absolutely, yeah. But he's also a parent of a kid with severe special needs, so of course he knows what he's doing.
Yeah. Another example. I'm kind of Ellie as well. There are lots of things. We're going to do more than one of these, Bo. Mm-hmm. We're still planning where this fits and how we do this. There's lots of conversations to have. But I think one of the things for me that I think you kind of explained very well is that where you and I have been into some fairly tough places together. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Can't say where, obviously, because I don't want to be sued. But one of the things that I think is interesting is this concept of, are we actually trying to get people to reflect on their thinking and change their thinking? and not their behavior as the main goal. The behavior, if people change their behavior, it's because they figured things out with a little bit of help from us. Is that a fair summary, if you think, where we are these days? It's about changing that perspective. Ellie has a hashtag called Flip the Narrative. It's a lovely hashtag.
Exactly.
It fits beautifully into this. But what are your thoughts on that? About how we're trying to, can we change thinking styles? Sorry to sound philosophical. Are you an optimist or a pessimist? That's binary, or you're somewhere else. They are usual.
Yeah, I'd say it like this. Of course we can, but there's different ways of doing it.
Yeah.
I like to, I work in Denmark, where I work a lot in Denmark. And in Denmark, they are very highly educated. The people working in special needs field there have 4 years of university studies in social work. So that means I can actually talk to their brains. It's actually quite easy to make that shift in thinking. In Sweden, where we don't have any education in this field, people are uneducated. It's sometimes we need to go another way. And I had this.
Sorry for the listeners. What Joe meant by that, he's in both cultures. I don't think all Swedes are uneducated. I just thought I'd get that caveat in there, but I do agree with you. I know
but we don't have any. We don't have any educations that are, aiming at that at the field of special needs. They might be teachers, but they're very few. There might be occupational therapists, but very few, and the most will just not have any education. And then I did this Studio 3 course many years ago, and there was one of these guys I could not get through to him on day one, which is the theory day. But on day 3 he was crying, and I think. He used to work in the door in the bars, as a bouncer, and he needed to learn through his muscles. So I think we can always change the way of thinking, but some people it go through the body, and some people it go through the ears, and I think that's why I don't need Studio 3 so much in what I'm doing, but I need it in that way that in order to reach some of these people, I need the Studio 3, and the rest I can reach through thinking, writing, and talking, and counseling. But there are some where we actually need this physical. So Studio 3 is not only for making a better life for people who are exposed to a lot of violence. It's also in order to get through to the thinking of some of our stuff.
It's a lovely example, because I know you've mentioned that before in the old days. Sometimes we have to train people in alternatives, but that can be very powerful, because when, often people feel a bit ashamed that, a bouncer in a nightclub would be applying the same skills to vulnerable people in care anyway. I'm now of the philosophy, I don't even want them applying those skills to other people too.
No, exactly.
Leave them alone. It's dangerous. I can say this, and it's a reflection, Eddie. I didn't know I was going to go here. I was in a certain country many years ago doing low arousal workshops, getting people to change their thought patterns. All I'll say is in a country you might have heard of called Israel. And even going back 15 years ago, there were lots of polarized views in the room about these things. And it literally was split down the middle, nearly everything I did. I met humanistic people, and I met the people who almost thought militaristically about, this is a problem, I fix this person by restraining them, it's okay. And what I learned was none of them are bad people in the traditional sense of the word. If I went into good and bad, I wouldn't be able to do what I'm trying to say, which is
exactly.
And your example with the nightclub person is exactly the same. You reach out to someone and give them a different language around what you're doing, and you show them that there is an alternative. But when we do that, and you've seen it as well, we see some quite phenomenal change, which is good, but it can be very distressing for people to think differently. Actually distressing to think differently.
Yeah, and I think some people will not. We talk about dichotomy of soft and hard. If you think the world is like that, it's very difficult to understand what we're saying. But we can still go through the body. With some of those people. So I think everybody's doing their best in order to make their lives work. And we all do, and we just need sometimes to help people to understand what's the best in terms of thinking and in terms of method. But of course, I haven't found any evil people in my line of work, and I've even done a lot of assessments of people that said those psychopaths. I never met anyone who actually was it. I don't believe it exists. I think people are doing their best. Some of them are quite bad at it, but
maybe there's a podcast to be done on that as well. Really,
yeah.
I might have met a handful, I would say,
Yeah. But they try to survive too. I mean,
yeah, they're surviving.
Yeah.
Go on, Ellie. Go on.
Just want to break up the bromance for a minute. I'm just going to say, I would just like to talk about language, because the emotional contagion affecting the stuff that I think humans are all need to be more mindfully aware, as Ryan would say, about. But Bo, just in your opinion, one of the things we talked about briefly yesterday was we talked about, in advance of talking to you, was one of the things we wanted to talk about, languaging and narratives and stories we tell each other about, the young man with the knives, or whatever story we're telling, and how we're telling it. And, it can be inferred differently, and people will say, well, if I was there, I would have. And I'm like, where does it root from? And one of the things we hear quite a lot, particularly when people are in a position of supporting others, is words like targeting, aggressive, manipulating, very emotionally charged language directed at people that are actually clients, although people don't like that term, in receipt of support that you are being paid to deliver. Now, I'm always on the side of the supporter, because we have a wonderful team around my daughter. I absolutely see the value. These people are phenomenal. They should get paid what commissioners get paid in my book, because they are on the front line.
Yeah.
And we do not value them, and we do not invest in them. Some companies do. But it's, for me, I could quite see why the language slips, because in lieu of being able to say those people in very far away offices who bring me in and actually don't value me at all, and have lots of me in the business, where does that direct to? Does it direct up the food chain, or does it go down to the person I'm supposed to be supporting? Quite often we see that, don't we? And we hear this it might be in meetings or post incident, it might be written up, and it's this horrible language. They were targeting me, they were manipulating me, they were being aggressive. And I'm like, I don't think my daughter's ever been any of those things.
No, exactly. I think,
where does that come from, do you think?
I think it comes from powerlessness. You feel powerless, and that's why you use the language of somebody who's using power over you. Yes. And the powerlessness comes from not having. I think we were talking about responsibility in the beginning, and we're back to that. This is about, if I take on responsibility, I do not call a person aggressive, because that means the responsibility is on the person. So I need to use another word, maybe afraid. That would give me responsibility back, and that would make me powerful if I think like that. So I think the words come from powerlessness, and I think even if we have thought things through, there are still times we might slip.
Yes.
And some of the situations I've identified is when we're stressed.
Yeah.
Then we have a tendency to get rid of responsibility. When we do have a lack of method, I was supposed to use this, I don't know what to do here. And also, maybe the ones I've thought most about the last years is what I call expectations of obedience. If I think, it's so funny. I don't know how you say in English, but I think it's the same. You do not say obey to kids anymore. You say listen to the adults. You should listen to what I say. And the funny thing about it is that it's never the ears the problem is in. The problem is the kid's not doing what you're saying. It's not hearing what you're saying. But still you say, now you need to listen. So we have an expectation of obedience in that situation. And funnily enough, kids are not very obedient. The very smart ones go below the radar. The not very smart ones, they just tell us off in the situation. And then if we have an expectation of obedience, we become stressed. I thought he would do it because I asked him and he didn't. That means I do not have any methods. So I become powerless there too. So what we actually need to do is to take on responsibility, saying, he's hitting me. I need to find out a way to get him to stop that. It's not that I need to get him to stop it. It's I need to find out a way to get him to stop it. So we are back in responsibility when these words come. And they come out of frustration and out of powerlessness. And I think mainly the stress, the lack of method, the expectation of obedience are the bigger ones.
Yeah. And I think it's confronting and conflicting, isn't it? I'm just thinking of something Alexis said, which threw me slightly, which is why we're going to do a part 2. So she was a PE teacher. And she said at the end of her interview, she said, having been through these horrific experiences, absolutely. I mean, I don't actually know how she's standing up. She said, but on Friday I was a PE teacher. On Monday I was section, but Friday I was a PE teacher. And when I blew the whistle, I expected those kids to be standing on the line.
Yeah.
And then by Monday, when things had absolutely fallen apart for her because of a number of circumstances, she was forcibly, detained.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, but on Friday I was that person. And what I want people to understand is this stuff is much closer and nearer and in our worlds than we think it is.
Yes.
And there is quite often a very small gap between it being us and not being us. And why is it so important we think about these things? Because it does affect everybody. And we can become part of these conversations quite easily, particularly maybe later in life, or we might acquire a disability, or we might need support, or we might.
Yeah, there are many other situations. I think when staff say to me he's manipulating, I say that no, it doesn't work like that, because the people who are manipulating well enough, you never realize they're doing it. But you see it all the time in this person. So he might be manipulative, but he's doing it in a very, very poor fashion. He's he's very bad at doing it. The good manipulators here, they are staff, because that's what they do. They manipulate the service users into doing everything we want them to do. So we actually hire the manipulators here. We do not place them here. That's very important. And when we talk about it that way, we take out the morality discussion from it and talk about it just as a behavior. And we need to do that in order to not get lost in it. And then I'd say one of the best situations I've had, I have a lot of grandkids, 12 grandkids actually, and a lot of them play football, of course. And sometimes I've gone to football practice with some of the boys. I think football trainers for 5-year-olds, I mean, they might have 25-year-olds. They're just one football trainer, and he might be 19, and he's not even getting paid. It's just doing it as part of his own football experience. And I've seen such amazingly able football trainers of 18 years of age managing 25-year-olds without having to raise their voice. Because they know if I raise my voice, they will not come back. I mean, this is low arousal in a situation I would never put staff members in. But they manage it. It's amazing. So of course we need to have these skills in order to get things to work, even in that part of the society as well. And I think a lot of people have them. And I think it's so funny. Now the oldest one is 12, and he's playing an academy team. So it's getting there, and he's quite good. And I went to look at a training session, and the trainer says, "Oh, I recognize you." He says, "Now I'm getting a little bit anxious about what you think about the way I do it here." And I said, "You don't have to worry. You're a football trainer. I know you can manage this, because otherwise the kids wouldn't come back. It's actually that simple.
Yeah.
And I have extreme respect for what they actually do. I mean, because that's an everyday situation. And I would never put my staff members managing 25-year-olds. It just wouldn't happen. No money is worth that.
Yeah.
But they do it every week.
Mm-hmm.
It's amazing.
Yeah, this concept of, well, I know we're running out of time now, Ellie, but
I know.
if we applied, I was asked this recently again by somebody, I said, if we applied in business low arousal principles properly, we would be more productive.
Oh,
If we use the approaches that are quite coercive that we see in other aspects of our life and applied it as a business, most of those businesses would fail.
Yeah.
They would just fail.
Look at my Swedish politician. He used low arousal in politics, and it was just amazing the results he would get.
Yeah. It's a nice example.
Yeah. So
Ellie, I'm looking at you and avoiding the bromance now. Deeply hurt for our listeners. Deeply cut to the marrow. Carry on.
Well, we have one question that we ask everybody towards the end, Bo, and it's really because if this was Desert Island Discs, you'd get your moment to pick 3, I think it is, to go with you. So this is kind of if you were going to be known for one thing when you finally exit this place in whatever fashion you do, because everybody has their own beliefs, what would you like to be known for?
I think 3 is too much. I do not have that high aspirations.
No, one's fine. One's
fine. Yeah, I'd say he was a nice person. That's good enough.
That's lovely. You don't want to leave a legacy of your work?
No, I just, then I have to fold this out a little bit. I got this question from one of my longtime co-workers. She says, it's going backwards now. Everything we fought for 10 years ago is going backwards now. And I said, and she says, but then our lives are wasted. I said, no. It might go up and it might go down, and it goes through the years it will do. And we are not revolutionizing. We're not revolutioning the world. What we are doing is making the life just around us, just now, a little bit better for some people. And if we can make just one person's life a little bit better, then it's actually very much worth living. So, and I think the best way I can make people's life a little nicer around me is being nice.
Yeah.
It's actually that simple. Yeah. So I don't think there would be need for people who think like us in 100 years, and there was a need for it 2,000 years ago, and they were at that time too. It's us being human beings. We need to all the time fight our 2 ways of thinking. In one way, we think I need to take care of the weak, and another way, we're thinking that the idiots can't be here. And it happens for all of us, and we need to pull it in the right direction. And that's what we're doing in our time, and somebody else will do it in a later time, and it's good enough.
Yeah. Thank you. I think that's really poignant, because I think if everybody focused on their lane like that, as in, I'm going to be a good person, I'm going to be responsible for what I put into the world and mindful about, I think we'd get things sorted out. I think, it is really powerful what you just said, because I think my daughter thrives on this. That's the difference between a good and a not good day.
Yeah. And you can have a good day and a good day and a good day and a good day, and then you compile them on top into a good life.
Yes.
And that's good enough.
It is. It is absolutely good enough. Thank you, Bo. It's been a real pleasure to meet you. I know you and Andy have known each other a long time, but that's the first time I've met you, and it's lovely to just start unpacking some of the questions. There are lots more we skipped over, but I think for anyone listening today, I would imagine they are hooked. I'm hooked. I want to ask you more things, but we're out of time today.
Yes.
So
I can confidently say there will be a part 2 and part 3 and part 4, Bo. You know that.
Yeah.
So
I talk too much. I know.
Yeah. No, you don't.
You talk too much.